We'll have you swear.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Horwath. If you could just put your right hand on the Bible in front of you, please. Thank you. Do you solemnly swear that the evidence you shall give to this committee touching the subject of the present inquiry shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
Thank you, and you can take up to 10 minutes for an opening statement, and then we'll have about 20 minutes each for the three parties to ask questions. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I'm Rick Horwath, founder, president, and CEO of Air Bravo Corp, the largest air ambulance service provider to Ornge and the citizens and taxpayers of Ontario. I've been directly involved in the air ambulance industry for over 17 years with over 15,000 flight hours to my credit as a pilot. Air Bravo began its operation in 2001 out of a base in Elliott Lake with one twin-engine piston aircraft. At that time, I was the pilot, chief pilot, director of ops, and held many other positions within Air Bravo in order to ensure that Air Bravo was a safe, efficient, productive, and growing company. With perseverance and practicality and excellent staff, Air Bravo grew into the enterprise it is today. In that, Air Bravo has operated as many as 10 advanced turbine aircraft from 5 strategically located bases in Ontario and employed in excess of 90 highly trained staff at our peak. Our primary focus has been and still continues to be on air medical patient transfers, a specialty which I can categorically and confidently state that Air Bravo and my excellent staff perform with unparalleled expertise and productivity. Air Bravo has applied over 30,000 injury-free flight hours in direct service to air ambulance industry of Ontario. By way of example, Air Bravo has achieved a platinum rating for 3 years in a row as determined by Ornge's own safety auditor, Argus International, while Ornge themselves have never risen above a gold rating. Air Bravo has also enjoyed a good relationship with Transport Canada, with many successful audits, with no enforcement actions needed to remain compliant. Initially, it was as with all standing agreement carriers, Air Bravo was administered and dispatched directly by the Ministry of Health. This arrangement was an efficient and mutually beneficial one, in which the patients were safely transported by an aircraft and a flight crew, including qualified flight paramedics, provided all by the private sector, which was specifically in a direct response to the need and care level deemed appropriate by the Ministry of Health. In my opinion, the checks and balances inherent to that system always ensured quality medical care which was governed and regulated by the MOH, a fair and reasonable cost due to the nature of the competition of the free enterprise system. In or about 2006, with the advent of Ornge, this arrangement ceased to function. It was instead replaced by a bloated bureaucracy more concerned with politics and the building of an empire with spin-off for-profit companies, while operating under the hypocritical guise of nobly providing an essential medical service to the citizens of Ontario. In my view, this has proven to be a marked disservice to the citizens of Ontario and all standing agreement carriers who had been delivering valuable and efficient services, both publicly and privately, for many years, all of which was to the benefit of the Ministry of Health and the taxpayers of Ontario. One of our first glimpses into things to come shortly after Ornge's establishment was their issuance of a request for information. This request, or RFI, was for the provision of all information related to the operation of an air ambulance operation, including but not limited to the specific operating cost of the various types of aircrafts in service, our employee wages, our Transport Canada approved operation manuals, our aircraft standard operating procedures, etc. The reason given by Ornge for this request was for transparency in the government contracts. In any business, this is all considered privileged and confidential proprietary information, which was garnered from years of experience in a large investment in time, effort, and money by the management of the respective carriers. Clearly, in any free and democratic society, this is confidential, which is the executive which is the exclusive business property of the owner, in my case, Air Bravo. Alternatively, equivalent, generic, and extremely nonspecific information could have been obtained by Ornge through or by a contract from a private aviation consultant. However, this contract would have probably cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. All carriers were not so subtly encouraged to provide this information. Rather, there was a thinly veiled threat of upcoming contract consequences should this not be provided. Begrudgingly, we all complied with the assurance from the then Vice President of Aviation of Ornge that they had no interest or plans to set up their own air service. Surprisingly, within 6 months of uttering these words, Ornge Air applied for their own operating certificate to Transport Canada for the provision of an air carrier license. Not surprisingly was what was to become their trademark arrogance that they had not even attempted to disguise the plagiarism. Ornge, in bold fashion, used such items as standard aircraft operating procedures and checklists, which were taken verbatim from the ones we had provided. Indeed, it is not so subtle coincidence that the aircraft Ornge chose as being most suited for their operation, and which they overspent to acquire, was the Pilatus PC-12. The same type of aircraft that Air Bravo pioneered as an ideal air ambulance aircraft, and the same type that we currently operate ourselves. Yes, the very same aircraft for which we provided all the necessary manuals, cost, operating requirements for as demanded by the RFI. Ironically, Ornge now has 10 fixed-wing aircraft, the same amount that Air Bravo had at its peak. The only exception is Air Bravo staffed and utilized all 10 aircraft. Ornge only staffs and utilizes 4 and keeps 6 as backup. Upon the formation of Ornge Air, a for-profit company, a contract to provide Ornge with air ambulance was awarded to them without regard to any traditional tendering, which in my view is contrary to the legislated requirements. As a result, Ornge Air instantly became the largest air ambulance carrier, to the detriment and in some cases demise of the established SAA operators. At one point, out of frustration in what I considered to be ongoing questionable business practices, I made a confidential inquiry to the Standing Agreement Carriers Executive Liaison Representative at Ornge. Specifically, I asked if the board was fully aware of their conduct. Similarly, I received a notice that I was to present myself for a meeting with Dr. Chris Mazza at their offices in Toronto at a specified time and date. Please bear in mind at this time that I lived in Elliott Lake, a 6-hour drive away. I had high hopes at the time that the meeting of this nature would prove beneficial and iron out some of the differences we had been encountering. Unfortunately, the meeting was short-lived, lasting literally less than 5 minutes. During that brief meeting, Dr. Mazza advised me, and I quote, "I do not report to the board reports to me. Do you understand?" Clearly, I was surprised and shocked at such a statement. That was the end of the meeting. It should be noted that throughout this period, several of our submitted invoices were disputed by Ornge for a variety of what we had deemed to be unsubstantiated and or frivolous reasons. The Air Bravo invoices were frequently either short paid or dismissed in their entirety, with little or no valid reason given. Our ongoing efforts to collect these proved to be in vain and eventually were totaled with interest in excess of $600,000. As renewal of the 3-year RFP neared, Ornge offered a settlement in the amount of less than 10 cents on the dollar, indicating quite brazenly that a contract renewal would not be forthcoming if the matter was not signed off as payment in full. As the deadline awarding the new RFPs loomed and the perception of that future of my company would be in peril and the 90 employees that I was employing, if I did not comply with the terms of the settlement, I received an email from the Standing Agreement Contract Administrator, a gentleman who ended his employment with Ornge last week. It had 2 words in that email, tick-tock, which to me means time is finished, either sign off on a settlement or no contract. Along with that came a threatening phone call from the CEO, Dr. Chris Mazza, and I was left with the ultimatum and had no choice but to accept this pittance in settlement. Under duress, I accepted this. Rightly or wrongly, I call this extortion. It's also worth noting that during this time of the RFP submissions, myself and the other carriers submitted sealed tenders in good faith and in accordance with the standard tendering process. Contrary to this process, each carrier was then individually called in for a private meeting with Ornge after the RFP deadline. Their respective tendered price per hour was questioned, and each was advised that the awarding of the contractual guaranteed hours would be in accordance with the lowest cost carrier. As I understand it, each SA carrier, including Air Bravo, was instructed to re-examine their cost structure to see if they could offer a price suggested by Ornge negotiating panel. It was suggested that without meeting this price, a carrier could not expect to be awarded desired guaranteed hours. Ladies and gentlemen, these are a few of the examples of questionable business practices that have been implemented at Ornge and which permeates their corporate culture to this day. Having met some of the executive managers and board members which have succeeded Dr. Mazza, I hold them in high regard and have no evidence to the contrary of anything but integrity in their leadership. Regrettably, once burned, twice shy. The questionable and unethical business practices still exist at Ornge and with its staff. Air Bravo, along with the other air ambulance service providers, have served the citizens of this province safely, efficiently, and cost-effectively prior to the advent of Ornge. In essence, the system under the prior administration of the Ministry of Health was not broken. In my view, this previous system or operation was designed by the medical and aviation professionals with the experience and know-how to get the job done in a safe and timely manner. The same cannot be said of Ornge, even to this day, and after hundreds of millions of taxpayers' dollars that have been spent to set up a cumbersome, ineffective, and political white elephant. Respectfully, I urge you to consider the dissolution of the current operations and return to allowing government agencies such as the Ministry of Health or the Ministry of Transport to administer, regulate, and dispatch, and allow us, the aviation professionals, to do what we do best, flying airplanes and providing the vital emergency medical care needed of the taxpayers. Ask yourself, how does the private sector compete when our main customer is our regulator and our competitor at the same time? In closing, I thank you for the privilege of giving me the opportunity to address this committee and in advance your invitation and consideration.
Thank you very much for the opening statement, and we'll move to the opposition first. And you have 20 minutes, Mr. Klees. Mr. Klees.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Horwath, thank you for coming today. The reason that we wanted to hear from you and the other standing agreement providers is that I think it's important as we draw our hearings to a close that we have the perspective of the private sector and how service is delivered. I want to pick up on a comment that you made which is disturbing to me, and that is, I think I'm quoting you, when you said, unfortunately, questionable and unethical business practices still exist at Ornge. Could you expand on that? Could you give us an example of what it is that you're referring to?
Yes, there's a couple examples. One would be I have asked for clarification on a conflict of interest issue which stems from another carrier being allowed to use a full-time Ornge employee to help author their RFP submission without declaring that as a possible conflict of interest. That has been basically, they have addressed it by saying they're investigating it, but nothing becomes of it. There's other examples of, even in a recent renewal of our latest contract, there was still some, shall we say, negotiating of the tender after the deadline, and I just think that's unethical and a sealed tender process.
Could you elaborate on that? What exactly happened?
Being called and asked if, are you sure that's the final price you want to submit?
And who was it who called?
An Ornge representative.
Do you recall who that was?
Gentleman's name, Ted Rubicki.
So Mr. Rubicki called you after tenders were closed?
Mm-hmm.
And specifically, what did he say?
I just said, are you sure those are the numbers you want to go with? They may not be the numbers that will get you the guaranteed hours that you'd like.
So the implication was that he would allow you to change the numbers?
Potentially, yes.
And did you?
No.
Okay. Any other examples of concerns that you have about business practices there?
The fact that they're still being allowed to continue their air service without having to ever tender it against us and become our competitor, and using their guys as being a government agency to poach employees of ours to go to work for them, knowing their strengths in the air ambulance industry.
Have you reported any of your specific concerns, such as this issue around the tendering to anyone senior at Ornge? Did you?
I knew they were all familiar with it.
So it's your opinion that Mr. McCallum would have been aware of that call was made to you?
Yes.
And why do you say that?
I was told that they were aware of it.
Who told you that the senior executives were aware of that call?
Well, Ted Rubicki himself, and also just through the email chains and seeing who was CC'd on things would make me believe that they were aware.
Okay. I'd like to change the focus somewhat. You were quoted in a press release, and I think you just said it in your opening statement as well, that Air Bravo is the largest standing agreement carrier. How many aircraft do you have in service directly dedicated to Ornge at this time?
We have 6 aircraft that can be dispatched for Ornge at any given time.
Okay. Are you involved in any other aviation business, private services that you provide, charters?
Yes, we do provide private charters. We provide private air ambulance for repatriation and, just private charters.
So what percentage of your business would be Ornge focused?
Today it would be in the 65 to 75% range. When we originally started and up to 2007, 2008, we would be around 90%. When we first started, it was 100%. So.
Okay. And why that reduction in business?
To stay in business, we had to diversify, and as Ornge created their Ornge Air, it made it even more so clear that we had to diversify to stay the size we are in to succeed.
You operate under a standing agreement. That standing agreement is standard for all of the standing agreement providers, I'm assuming. There isn't a difference between yourselves and other aviation companies?
No, it's all the same.
Okay. When you make your bid, are you required to provide financial assurance and give evidence of the financial stability of the company?
Yes.
In the handout that you have in front of you under Schedule A.
Yes.
Now this is actually Schedule A from an RFI from previous RFIs. The last 2 requests for proposals did not contain this particular section. There's no requirement in the request for proposals for the last 2 rounds of proposals that requires a proponent to provide any financial information regarding their corporation. You're aware of that?
Yes.
The last time that you put your proposal, your submission forward, did you provide financial information, tax returns? Did you provide any information about the financial stability of your company?
In the last one we just did?
Yes.
Not that I recall, no.
Did it surprise you that you weren't asked for any of that financial information?
In some regard, yes, and others, no, because we had raised that issue several times that it was, especially with Ornge, we raised the issue, why would we give our financial information to our competitor?
Okay. How many bases of operation do you have?
Presently, we have 3.
In your opening statement, I thought you said 5.
At our peak, we had 5.
So, and on your website it says 5.
Yeah, the website hasn't. We just recently consolidated down to 3 bases within the last month and a half.
So if you have 3, why would you tell us in your opening statement that you have 5?
That was a statement based on, at our peak, at Air Bravo's peak, we were at 5 bases.
Okay.
And it was to show that we had 10 airplanes, 5 bases, which is very similar to the model that Ornge uses, which was giving to them during our RFI back in 2007, I believe that was.
Which 2 bases do you no longer operate out of?
Sioux Lookout and Timmins.
And when did you stop operating out of Timmins?
Approximately 2 months ago, we pulled our airplane out of there.
When did you last have access to a hangar in Timmins?
We've had access to a hangar up until we pulled out, basically.
So the information that we have is that there were a number of months that you were actually operating from the tarmac in Timmins, that you did not have access to the hangar. Is that incorrect information?
That is in the fact that we did have access to a hangar, we just opted not to.
Pardon?
We did have access to a hangar. It was Lloyd Richard's hangar. It wasn't the hangar that we had been in presently.
And why did you no longer have access to the hangar that you were leasing?
Because when our lease contract came for renewal, the landlord for the hangar increased the rent higher than what we could afford to operate it from at our current rates that we were being paid for by Ornge.
Is it a fact that there were substantial property taxes that were owing on that hangar that were your responsibility, that the landlord wanted you to pay?
There is some disputed land use or land taxes, yes.
And is that the reason the landlord refused to renew the lease?
No, he refused to renew the lease because I refused to sign the increase in rent.
Which included the outstanding taxes?
No, just the actual monthly rent itself is what I disagreed with.
Is there a legal dispute about those ongoing now?
Yes.
Okay. So that has not been resolved. And what is the reason for the Sioux Lookout issue? Why are you no longer operating out of there?
Because basically it was economics, and that base wasn't paying for itself to continue operating under it.
Are there funds owing to the owner of that?
No.
So there are no disputes regarding any outstanding debts there?
Everything's current with that landlord.
Okay. I'd like to ask you about Ornge's oversight of your operations. You contract to Ornge for your services. One of the issues that this committee has been dealing with is the lack of oversight on the part of the Ministry of Health of Ornge. in your particular case, Ornge contracts with you to provide specific service. And your agreements are extensive in terms of the requirements that have to be there. What is the mechanism that Ornge uses to ensure that you're in compliance with your agreement?
The mechanisms that Ornge uses to ensure that we're in compliance with the contract or with the agreement? They do have auditors come in and audit us. They've used an outside audit firm of Argus to see if we meet our safety requirements. And with those audits, which we've had several of from Argus, we've always maintained what they have, their highest rating of being a platinum rating. And they also have I guess they have performance reviews that they state in their contract, but I've never really seen them come around and enforce those performance reviews.
So Ornge has not been on site at any time to inspect
they come on
directly?
site when you originally apply to open a base or to add an aircraft. They'll come on site, inspect that aircraft, inspect that base.
But subsequently there have been no follow-ups?
No.
I understand that one of the requirements is that your airplanes contain the TAWS technology.
Yes.
And do all of your planes comply
Yes,
with that requirement?
Yes.
TAWS, for the record, is Terrain Avoidance Warning System, right?
Correct.
And, when did you come into compliance with that requirement?
Within the time frame that was given on the first, when they first set up that requirement.
Okay. Can I just ask about the financial position of Air Bravo? There have been some reports that there are a number of outstanding debts that Air Bravo has, whether it's with hangars or whether it's suppliers. Is that competitor noise, or is there some substance to that issue?
There may be some of that being competitor noise and not knowing, obviously, the true story and rumor mills. As with any company with either growing pains or the present economy, there may be times when cash flow makes it tough to make all bills on time.
You understand why that is an issue. The reason it's an issue is that, particularly given the fact that Air Bravo is providing a good percentage of the services to our air ambulance service, when there is a suggestion that there may be a financial issue with that company, the possibility of the banks moving in or doors closing have serious implications to a very essential service in our province. And so I would ask you this question. Is Ornge aware of some of the financial challenges that you're facing? And if so, what have the discussions been like between yourself and Ornge?
Yes, there's been a couple examples or a couple instances where Ornge has been aware that there were some bills that were being paid. Yes.
And can I put it this way? What is the fallback position? Or do you have a plan in place to assure Ornge and to assure the province, the government of Ontario, that your service is solid, that your company is solid, that you will in fact be able to provide that service? Because this is not just about a business surviving, this is about an essential healthcare service. How practical are those discussions between yourself and Ornge to provide assurance of a continuation of that air ambulance service?
Well, one thing is you look at history, we have proven that we're one of the carriers that has been there through thick and thin, through the economic times, and we still persevere and still maintain a safe record and keep a platinum rating with Argus, which also looks at your safety record and your ability to carry on business. And you know, we've proven it over time that we will be in business. We will provide the service.
Was there
and safely.
Was there a credit report done with your last round of application for service?
Was there a credit report done? No.
Yes. Assuming there was a credit report ordered on your operation today, what would that look like?
I'm not sure, sir.
So you're unsure as to whether that credit rating would support the government awarding or Ornge awarding a contract to you?
It would depend on what their requirements of that credit report be, I would imagine.
Okay. Who at Ornge do you report to directly? Do you have a direct liaison at Ornge?
Between the SA carriers and Ornge, usually our liaison was Ted Ribicki. He is no longer with Ornge as of last Friday. I believe he resigned. Above that would be Rob Giguère, is who I've been reporting to directly myself.
Thank you. Let me just ask you about the relationship then between yourself and Mr. Giguère. Do you feel that that is an open communication, that you can talk to him professional to professional and with full disclosure and ensure that you're both on the same wavelength in terms of what your responsibilities are to deliver your service? Is that an open communication? Do you feel, I'm hoping, I guess, that he doesn't fall into that category of business practices that you've referred to in your opening statement?
Yes, I believe my discussions with him can be very open and candid. Although in speaking about the conflict of interest issue that I brought up as a business practice and in that investigation, I was made aware that the legal team at Ornge, specifically Mr. Patterson, was actually sending confidential emails between myself and Mr. Giguère on to my direct competitors.
We are pretty much out of time now, Mr. Klees. We'll move to the NDP. Ms. Jelinek.
I don't know if it's because I didn't hear good, but I just want to check when Mr. Klees asked you about the TAWS and asked when did you bring that onto your aircraft, I did not hear the date.
I don't know the specific date. I just know that we were in compliance with when they needed to be, the date that they'd given us to have them in compliance. We were.
Could you put it in time? Was it last week, last month, last year?
Well, it was several years ago.
Several years? Okay. Thank you. I was very interested by your opening comments, especially when you talk about, like they were thinly veiled threats of compliance. If you did not give them the information on the request for information, you basically felt that your livelihood was going to be threatened, that those people had the final yay or nay as to whether you were going to exist or not. Doesn't it take much of a threat to be scared in those situations? Am I reading this well?
Yes.
Okay. Given what you've told us of and what you label as trademarks of arrogance, which you're not the first one to say this, by the way, what kind of, I guess, what kind of protection did you have? Were you ever able to go to the ministry and say, listen, I don't think I'm being treated fairly by the team at Ornge? Did you feel that that was available to you, and did you make use of it?
I felt it was available, and I believe myself and other carriers expressed those concerns at different times to the Ministry of Health, but basically, and I can't recall the exact times or persons, but some of them were during, we have a 3-year Ministry of Health audit that they come in and audit us for our air ambulance license.
Mm-hmm.
And during those times, you'd bring up those discussions of your mistrust in the system, and basically the people during those audits would say, yeah, we all understand, but they're pretty much untouchable. That Ornge is untouchable.
So those are people that works from the Ministry of Health. They go through all of the bases. They do the audit for your ambulance license.
Right.
You would have open conversations with them and talk to them about the trademarks of arrogance and basically what was happening to you. And none of them offered to help you?
They didn't know what they could do. No.
Okay. Now that you look back, do you have any idea? Can you speculate as to why those people were not willing to help you?
They were either in support of it, which they openly had said they were not in support of, or maybe they just didn't have the authority or the ability to step on toes.
Do you figure it should have been different? If it had been, how would you have liked it to work? You could see that things at Ornge were wrong. What would have been for you, how should have the system work so that those wrongdoing were caught earlier, and that when you reported something, action would follow?
I think if we would have been assured of confidential in reporting what we thought was wrong and not having it go directly to Ornge, because I think most of the carriers would assume that if once Ornge found out that you were, call it a whistleblower on them, that your flying would basically come to a screeching halt and be blackballed. And in my situation and in most of the other SA carriers where majority, your largest customer is Ornge at the time, that's a tough gamble to take. That are you going to remain confidential, and is while you're waiting for something to take place to fix a problem, are you going to continue to be able to operate?
A huge gamble.
Between a rock and a hard place.
Yeah, a huge gamble. So what you're telling me is that you would like to have had the opportunity to have a confidential way to bring those issues to the ministry so that they could be investigated and action taken. Do you feel that after all the weeks, the months, the years that have gone by since we've tried to change Ornge, do you feel that now things have changed for the better? Do you feel that if you were to see something drastically wrong at Ornge, where would you go, and do you have confidence that it would be different than what it was before?
Can you repeat the last half of that?
Yeah. So you describe what it was like at Ornge before. Mm-hmm. You saw that things were wrong, but you felt that if you were to go to the ministry and complain, it would go back to Ornge, and Ornge would basically take it against you. Now, in 2013, if you had a complaint against Ornge that you wanted to bring to the ministry attention, do you figure that things are better, that there is somebody out there at the ministry that would listen to you and that things would be looked after?
I'm not so sure that the ministry has gained my confidence in that yet.
No, And what would it take, what should the ministry do so that it is perceived in a way that you feel that, yes, now they have a process in place that I know that if I complain, those will be in confidence, and the people that I complain to have enough of a status that they can actually do an investigation and change things around. What would bring you that confidence?
By seeing action taken from this special report from the Auditor General. The report was finished in 2012. We're now a year and a half later, and I haven't seen much action on the ministry's part to fix a lot of the problems that were brought up in the report. I think a little more action and quicker action would help build my confidence in the ministry.
So from where you're sitting, things have not changed in the sense that if you see wrongdoing, you're still stuck between a rock and a tough place and have no place to report those so that action can be taken.
Correct.
Okay. You were going to say something?
No, that's correct. I still feel that way.
Okay.
Can I ask you just to identify, and so when you noticed that there was, you were there when Ornge made that shift, and to your surprise, where they went from just providing the ambulance services to actually providing the air services. What did you notice as someone who's an expert in this field or has some significant expertise in the field? What were some of the problems with the way Ornge conducted their business, the way they operated when they took over the air side of it all? What did you observe as problems?
As problems in that area?
Yeah.
I observed that they went from having no air service to all of a sudden having one of the larger air services without the direct expertise on how to run an airline. Sure, they can hire some personnel, but they plagiarized all their manual and everything. So if somebody plagiarizes something, do they really understand what's in that manual and what it took to get to that place?
So that was your concern, that you thought they may not have expertise, but what actually happened that either showed that they didn't have expertise or showed that they made mistakes? So one was your concern that perhaps they plagiarized, perhaps they didn't have the expertise, they went from no air service to all of a sudden having the largest. But what were the actual objective things that you noticed that seemed to be, not efficient or not proper or not up to the standard that they should be?
Well, one thing for not efficient is I don't know any other airline that owns 10 airplanes and only operates 4 of them on any given day. That's an inefficiency right there. You absolutely are proving that you don't understand the economics of an airline. You can't own that many aircraft and only utilize, 40% of them.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And besides that, anything else that Ornge that they did that wasn't, to the standard that you would expect them to do? Whether it's efficiency, whether it's standard of care, whether it's the way they operated the airline. What were other things that you noticed? One was the efficiency, operating 4 out of 10. What else did you notice? If anything. If not, if you want to come back to that, I can go on to another area.
Think about that.
Yeah.
Like you were there since 2001. Can you place it in time as to at what point did you realize that not only that your suspicions were right, but at what point did you realize that there was something drastically wrong at Ornge? If you were to put a time frame of this, was it after it hit the front page of the paper or before?
It was well before it hit the front page of the paper. It was 2006, 2007 when we started realizing that they're actually looking to start up their own airline. The way they started doing business practices, and specifically when they finally started their own airlines, first of all, it was, no, we're not going to start an airline. 6 months later, yeah, we decided we're going to, and we've used all your information to do so. The next thing was, well, but yeah, we're going to start our own airline, but we will not take any of your employees or any employees of other SA carriers to build our airline. All of a sudden, they're poaching half of your employees. I made a call to, or made an inquest into Ornge as to why they were taking so many of my medics at one time, and it was at the time that Dr. Mazza and Rick Potter were in Switzerland negotiating their deal with Pilatus for their airplanes, and they were actually on a bus, and I have a witness to verify that. It's Mr. Arnone, who owns Pilatus Center Canada, was with them, and after they got my question on that this is unethical to take 8 of my medics all at one time to help build their airline, Dr. Mazza actually had Potter call me, took the phone from him, and said to Mr. Arnone, and I'm recapping from Mr. Arnone's statement, that I want you to listen to this phone call. This is what happens when you try to go against me. And in that phone call, I was told, do not ever question our ethics. Do not ever question why we are employing some of your employees again. If you do so, there will be no more work for you.
So, an open threat over the phone.
Mm.
How did you react to that?
Basically said, okay, well, I'll have to fight another way and just be perseverance in my company and hire new employees. How do you respond to that?
Yeah, you
Unless
had
you take them to court, and then you take them to court, now what happens to my business?
you have a lose-lose situation in front of you.
Right.
And by then, had you tried to go to the ministry to tell them you've created a monster?
At that point, no. I didn't go directly to them.
Okay. So the first indication, the thing was not even off the ground, that you already had solid indication that a monster was being created.
Oh, yes.
And so at what point did you try to reach to the ministry and told them what they had done?
At different times we'd had discussions with, as I mentioned, to auditors from the ministry. We'd also met as air carriers and had brought this up. We had brought these to the attention of the board members of Ornge at a meeting in Thunder Bay. I don't recall the date, but I can get that date for you. And they had offered to have open meetings with us, with the air carriers, to address our concerns that we were bringing forward. We had one meeting, and then they never, because that meeting was so confrontational, they never had another meeting with the air carriers over this.
So the board of Ornge held one of their regular meetings in Thunder Bay, made it an open meeting for you to attend.
Well, they made it a meeting in Thunder Bay because that was central for most of the operators to get to.
And you attended, you told them your side of the story, and
that we were totally against them setting up an air service, yes.
Okay.
And coming in direct competition with us.
That was before they set up the airline?
Yeah, it was while they were trying to set it up, yes.
Okay. And that was the only consultation that ever took place? They never?
Between Ornge and the air operators, yes.
Okay. Were you ready?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah,
I had.
Understand that certain areas of your concern, that you were concerned that your model was plagiarized, you were concerned that there was a competitor that was set up immediately to compete with you, that there was some practices that weren't ethical in the way they set up their business and becoming a competitor and just challenging your business directly. Beyond that, because if we're the public of Ontario and they're looking at this, they'll just look at you as just a disgruntled company that lost business, right? But beyond that, to the actual substance, what can you speak to in terms of the substance of what Ornge provided, their actual service that was flawed or that was as we see a big mess? What was it in the actual way they delivered their services that was problematic to you, beyond the competition? Which I understand where you're coming from, and I think it's obviously not appropriate. But just getting to the actual root of the matter, what did you notice was wrong with the actual service provided by Ornge, in terms of them taking over an airline all of a sudden, or creating an airline all of a sudden?
Well, one thing I can see is it became apparent that they allowed the unionized medics to more or less dictate whether an airplane was to go flying or not, based on how they felt about the weather, or instead of leaving that to the pilot's choice. Another thing would be the lack of, as you had already brought the point up, that we were required to have TAWs on our airplanes, but it comes to knowledge that they didn't enforce that on their own helicopters. And why didn't they? Why were they above having the same requirements that we had? Mm-hmm. And we had, especially the helicopter, we've had more experience in aviation and been in the business longer, but yet we're having higher requirements on us than they are with less experience.
Okay, that's fair. And then when it came to the Ministry of Health, so the Ornge Air Ambulance was taking a new direction, where they were, instead of just providing the medical services, they're also providing or taking over and running their own airline, fixed wing and rotor wing as well. When they did that, did the ministry ask the service providers or the other air providers or air carriers their opinion on whether Ornge could do this or not, or whether this was feasible, or whether it made sense? Did they ask your opinion on this?
No.
Okay.
My last minute then will be, those are taxpayers' dollars that went to create Ornge and to run it, etc. Do you think that the ministry did their job of monitoring this agency called Ornge?
No.
And what makes you say that?
I think it's become very apparent why I would say that, in the fact that even just reading through the auditor's report, it brings up a lot of questions as to where was all the money being funneled to, where was it, who was the actual beneficiary of the budget that was being utilized. It definitely wasn't the taxpayer or the patients of Ontario that was benefiting the most from this.
I agree. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move to the government. Ms. Jess.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Horwath, for your opening statement. I'll start off by picking up a little bit on Ms. Jelina's question in relation to when Ornge decided to operate its own aircraft and in essence be in competition to you. At some point during that pre-2012 era, in that point, you did have some concerns that you raised to the Ministry of Health and Long-Term Care. Do you have any emails or any concrete evidence of you forwarding these concerns?
Not with me present, but I
would you be able to make those available?
Yes, I will look for them.
Can we have a request to the clerk that occur? We would be most interested in seeing that.
I see the clerk writing. I assume he's writing. Yes, he's noting that.
Thank you. In terms of, and we understand, obviously this was a threat to your business and you had to reduce your operations in relation to air ambulance. Currently, so since the new management has been in place, can you describe your fleet, the capacity that you have of your aircraft time, or however you allocate that unit, I'm not sure how you do it, is dedicated to air ambulance through Ornge. Can you just describe a little bit of how many aircraft are employed for Ornge services, how many are not?
All of our aircraft are capable of flying for Ornge at any given day.
Yeah, but do they? I mean,
most of them do.
So is your fleet being used? Is your capacity being used to its full extent?
Our fleet is being used. We're not being used to our fullest capacity now.
What would be the gap? I mean, what sort of size of gap?
We have, from our peak years, we're down probably 50%.
I'm not so interested in your peak years. I'm interested in...
The peak years was prior to Ornge.
Right. No, I'm talking about now, of your
prior
capacity.
to Ornge era, I should say.
Your current capacity.
Mm-hmm.
How much is being used for Ornge? And do you have excess capacity that could be used either for your private chartering business or... I kind of want to know about your efficiency.
Okay, our efficiency is that, yeah, with Ornge, we are being utilized probably 65-70% of what they should be utilizing us, or could be. And where we had to diversify, and I think the question was raised earlier, what's the percentage of business? And we're slowly marketing our private charters and our private air ambulance to make up the difference in the lack of utilization on Ornge's side.
Okay, now turning to your contract, I'm quoting from the material we were given by the research officer. Air Bravo's contract with Ornge was up for renewal March 15th, 2013.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you did describe some sort of conversations that occurred with officials at Ornge. Was this prior to March 15th? Prior to the renewal? I'm just trying to understand the timeline here.
I don't have the timeline in front of me of when the tender was, the deadline for the tender, but yes, prior to us signing the new contract, yes, there was.
How was the tender performed? Did you have a sealed envelope wherein you put your proposal forward and it was going to be opened on a certain date along with other competitors? Help me understand how the standard offer works.
Yeah, they have an RFP, which is a request for proposals. They have a deadline then for requests for answer or questions that you can submit prior to the deadline of the submission that will be answered. And then once that deadline's over, then you have a deadline to have the submission submitted to them in a sealed envelope. So many copies, either electronic or paper, I forget the exact number at this time, with a separate envelope with your sealed pricing in it. They have a proposal that spells out all the requirements, such as Schedule A here, which some of that wasn't in this latest one. But
did you pose questions to Ornge prior? As
the last one?
You did not. Conversation, I think it was Mr. Rubicki at Ornge. Mm-hmm. When did they occur? Were they prior to the opening of the envelope?
Well, you have to understand Mr. Rubicki was the liaison between SA carriers and Ornge, so we have, at the minimum, weekly conversations with him on all issues to do with the SA carrier daily. Of what I had a specific conversation, I can't answer that.
Could you perhaps go over again exactly what Mr. Rubicki said to you?
There's been so many conversations with him, I can't recall what you're asking, like what.
But I mean, you made a fairly serious allegation in your opening statement that you felt that there was some impropriety in the current
in
process
the last two
at
tenders,
Ornge.
my opening statement addressed the tender process that happened 3 or 4, actually 5 years ago, where after we submitted our tenders, every carrier was brought down to Ornge. And at that time, it was Conrad Kaya and Fred Rusk and Ted Rubicki that met with us on individual each carrier brought in and discussed their tender and was asked to lower it.
I'd like you to talk about since the new management is in place at Ornge.
Mm-hmm.
Could you explain what impropriety you think has occurred?
There's still the conflict of interest issues. There's the sharing of confidential emails between myself and the COO of Ornge, Rob Jaguar, that were passed on to employees, actual emails passed on to employees at another service provider.
Can we see these emails? Again, Mr. Clerk, I would request that we get copies of these
Sure.
these emails.
Yep.
And with the date, obviously, will be clear.
Yes.
The envelopes, the field envelopes were opened.
Mhm.
What happened? Were you awarded a contract?
Eventually, yes.
What do you mean eventually?
It took quite some time for them to eventually have the contract signed from the deadline of the opening of the tenders until they actually submitted contracts for signature, and I'm of the assumption that was the same for all carriers. And they actually did ask us for a further extension of our current contract while they were still trying to iron out the new contracts that they wanted to.
So you continued to provide service to Ornge throughout that time?
Throughout the amendment period, yes.
And you've obviously accepted the contract, and you're currently providing the service to Ornge, as you've told us.
Yes.
What do you know about some of the measures that the government, the ministry, has proposed in terms of amendments to the Ambulance Act? Have you followed the proposals in the new regime?
I've been aware of some of the proposals, yes. I haven't followed them directly.
Well, just so you know, there will be, hopefully, when we finally pass this bill, some whistleblower protection, so that it's certainly our government's intention that what happened previously would not happen in the future, so that concerns can be raised and they will be responded to. Again, looking at what the researcher provided for us, I understand that Air Bravo was involved in the 6-month trial program between Sault Ste. Marie and Sudbury to provide airplane service for patients with scheduled hospital treatment. You were involved with that trial. Could you explain to us how that worked? Was it a separate contract that you had to do this trial program with Ornge?
Yes, it was a separate contract. I believe it was put out for tender for an amendment to the existing contract at that time, and we tendered on it and were awarded the trial period.
So you were able to use some of your capacity to take part in this particular service. Do we have any results? Would you have deemed it a success, or do we?
I believe it was successful, yes. They have discontinued that.
Were you transporting patients on a daily basis, or
yes.
How did it work?
Yes.
And again, I guess I'm a little confused about some of your allegations about what's happening currently at Ornge, because we were given in this document a direct quote from yourself. I guess the source was IPMI magazine, and what you say here is, we value our partnership with Ornge and welcome the opportunity for us to build on our existing relationships to help deliver an efficient and cost-effective air ambulance service for the benefit of the citizens of Ontario. So I'm wondering if at that point, this is actually dated June 18th, 2012, whether you had any reservations about what was happening at Ornge subsequent to the change from, there was a new board of directors, an interim CEO. What exactly does that mean?
Air Bravo and myself were hopeful that the change of the executives was going to make a big difference. And I think I truly believe that the new executives that were hired and are being used are trying to make a difference. I think the problem is the monster is so big, and that the culture of of Ornge was so integrated amongst its staff that I think it's gone beyond fixing
Well,
internally.
Elaborate for me. I don't quite understand what you see is going wrong now. I need clarification.
What's
on
going
that.
wrong now is we're still being regulated and monitored and being competed against by our biggest customer. I mean,
So are you saying the only solution is for Ornge not to operate their own fleet?
in my opinion, that's correct.
And of course, you would hope that your business would grow as a result of that.
I would hope that every SA carrier's business would grow, not just mine. I'm not just here for myself. I've had a lot of competitors of mine that are also good friends of mine that have, some of them have ceased and desist in operating for Ornge because there's not enough business for them. So it's not
Okay,
just
I think
I'm not making a comment.
I
just-
think we'll probably leave it at that, but I want to ensure that we get all those emails that you've referred to. We need to know who you corresponded with and when.
Okay, thank you very much. There is 8 minutes left of this round only.
Mission.
You can use it all. It's all your time if you want to use it.
Here, I'm always interested
Okay.
in the comments of my colleagues.
Okay, we'll have a couple minutes for each. Then go ahead, Mr. Klees.
I want to pick up Mr. Horwath to get some clarification between my question to you and your response to Ms. Jazik so that we have it correct. If I recall, in response to my question about the unethical business practices, you made specific reference to the fact that on this last round of tenders, that after the close of tenders, you received a call from Ornge asking you to change the numbers or consider changing the numbers or improving the numbers. Is that correct?
Yes, there was conversation to that effect, yes.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that because I don't think, in response to Ms. Jazik, that was clear. That's a very important issue, and I also want to just again confirm that in your response to me, you confirmed that you were assured that Dr. McCallum was aware that that call was taking place.
Mm-hmm.
Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Shillings?
Pardon me?
No questions. Excuse me. Back to you, Ms. Jazik.
I would just to pick up on Mr. Klees. What proof do you have of what you've just stated? I mean, did you make any notes at the time?
What proof do I
About
have of?
who told you that Dr. McCallum was aware, etc.?
I think I'd stated earlier that through potential string of who CC'd on different emails would tell me to believe that he was included in that. I would believe that if his executive board knows that he would be included in that. And
Sorry, if his
I believe
executive
I've
board-
seen his name on different emails as either being CC'd or emails to him to that regard. And being told personally by different people that he was aware of it.
So you'd be able to give us a list of the people who told you this?
And I can look for that list, Jeff.
I mean, this is a very serious allegation that you're making.
Yeah.
So perhaps we could, can you think of any of those individuals who might have told you that right now? I mean, we'll give you some time to look at your files, but who, to your best recollection now, do you recall as telling you that McCallum would have known about this?
It would be Rob Jaguar and Ted Revicki.
Rob Jaguar
And
and Ted?
I do know that Patterson was involved.
Okay. If you could get back to us with some, if you have any further information on that, we'd appreciate that. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, are we finished? It looks like it. Thank you very much for coming before the committee today.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Oh, interesting. Okay. Our next witness is here, which is Mr. Frank Behrendt from SkyCare, president of SkyCare. I'd like to welcome you. Welcome. And I just wanted to confirm that you've received the letter for witness coming before the committee.
Yes, I did.
Okay, very well. And our clerk will have you swear an oath or affirmation.
Sorry, could you just pronounce your last name for the record?
That's Behrendt.
Barron?
Yes, Behrendt.
Mr. Behrendt, could you please put your right hand on the Bible? Thank you. Mr. Behrendt, do you solemnly swear that the evidence you shall give to this committee touching the subject of the present inquiry shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Thank you, and you can take up to 10 minutes for an opening statement, and then we'll go to questioning from the three parties.
Okay.
Thanks.
Well, good afternoon. As a brief introduction, my name is Frank Behrendt. I'm the president of SkyCare Air Ambulance. SkyCare is a standing offer agreement carrier that provides both primary and advanced care service from our home base in Sioux Lookout. We've been an SOA carrier for the past, or just over 7 years. I was personally, though, I've been involved in both the delivery and development of air ambulance services for over 30 years and in 3 different jurisdictions in Canada. We want to thank you for calling SkyCare to appear before you, and for the fact that you're making such a determined effort to expose and understand all the issues. A good friend of mine quoted me the other day, or made a comment to me the other day, that sunlight is often the best disinfectant. And a good airing out is desperately needed. It's healthy and is a key step in getting Ontario's air ambulance system back on track. Before I answer questions, I'd like to quickly touch on just a couple of points, or a few points. And a simple one is just this simple fact that I think that a lot of people have forgotten, and that is, prior to the formation of Ornge, Ontario had one of the most highly regarded and reputable air ambulance delivery systems in North America. It needed some refinements and a process to facilitate continuous improvement, but it sure did not need to be dismantled. I think that we all know that Ornge's management of that system has caused serious harm on many fronts, and it's brought the system into disrepute. That's one point. 2, I think at the core, there's a core foundational thing that I think that has to underline what has to take place. And I believe that it's understanding that there are 3 core fundamental accountabilities or responsibilities that the government has when it's looking at what it's doing with regards to the air ambulance in Ontario. And those 3 core issues or core responsibilities or core accountabilities that the government must answer for is, first of all, it has a responsibility to the patient. Patients have a right to expect prompt access to safe, high-quality care. That's number one. That's got to be the number one priority, and it is so often getting forgotten because people have all of these personal agendas or empire agendas or whatever, the business agendas, bureaucratic agendas, political agendas, and that gets forgotten. The second accountability or the second responsibility that the government very clearly has is to the taxpayer, and I mean that's obviously true. The taxpayers are right to expect that they will get fair and full value for the taxes they've paid to the government. And another point on that is that just simply that money, at least in my life, I have not found money to grow on trees. There is a finite resource available to us, and the fact is that fiscal prudence is integral to the accessibility or integral to the accessibility of a service is its affordability. If you make a service unaffordable, you can't give it. How can you possibly hope to have access to it? And when you take a look at what's gone on, you've gone from a $90 million budget to $150 million, plus you've gone and borrowed $300 million to hand this over to somebody, and you've got half the bases and half the aircraft in Ontario, and you say, what's wrong? It's pretty obvious that there's something wrong with that. So there's a fiscal accountability, fiscal obligation, and there's an obligation on all of our parts, including the business community's part, to ensure that the services that are available are affordable. Because if they're not affordable, they will not be accessible. Thirdly, I believe that the government clearly has an obligation to the economy. And that may seem like an odd thing to be talking about at a medevac, an air ambulance discussion, but the fact is that when the government is making decisions, it at the very least has to take the position that it's not going to harm the economy. And certainly my expectation as a taxpayer is that the government is going to support the economy, it's going to stimulate the economy, and that it's not going to come along and undermine the economy. With what transpired, I certainly seen firsthand where small communities lost service and lost local businesses, and the economy in a local area was diminished because of some of the decisions that were made that resulted in some carriers having to shut their doors or substantially downsize. So very clearly, I see this as three priorities when you're taking a look at what the future is. One, you have to consider the patient. Two, you have got to get best value for your money. And three, there is an opportunity in this money that's being spent to stimulate the economy, to support the economy. And you need to make sure that all three of those, and I believe those are three core fundamental issues that are underlying that must be addressed. So it's the patient, the taxpayer, and the economy. Another observation that we have, just another quick point, and I guess this speaks a little bit to some of the things that Rick was saying. It's our observation that that people have been fired from Ornge. But has there structural change been made to address the conflicts of interest that exist? We haven't seen that. That the structural flaws, the very core conflicts of interest, they continue. It's a bad business model. I have a copy of it here, actually. The Canadian Business Magazine put out an article on the state of the Canadian healthcare system, and they made reference to that fact that the article was titled, I'm going to make sure I get it right, The Worst Run Industry in Canada, Healthcare. When you take a look at what's transpired, and one of the things that they talk in about this, the worst run business being healthcare, one of the things that they state and they refer to in here is the failure to follow even the most basic business management principles. What is the core principle of fairness that you're following? And if you don't get the principles right, your foundation is going to fail. So when we look at Ornge, and as we continue to watch what's happening, we're pleased to see some changes, and we're pleased to see that there's people that are making a lot of effort. But there is a need to address, it's not just about firing this bad guy or that bad guy, it's about addressing some of the core operating principles and philosophy that is the structure behind the organization. You need to take a look at that. Another point that I would want to speak to, I'm jumping from subject to subject here, I hope you don't mind. I have this comment to make about the overall strategy that needs to be looked at in the future, and that is that many strands make for a strong cord. I think that you need to be, and the government needs to be extremely cautious. They need to beware of anyone who wants it all. If you have a sole supplier, somebody looking to be a sole supplier, I think that you need to take that with a big grain of salt. A sole supplier, in my view, is a disaster waiting to happen. The fact is that we see this in so many places in life. 2 is better than 1. And a multiple cord makes for a much stronger cord. You want fail-safe is what you want. And if you go with a single cord, you will not have fail-safe. I have to put a plug in and jump into another point. Ontario's air carriers have and they continue to provide exceptional air ambulance services and financial value to the province of Ontario. I know that Rick had mentioned there was some question about whether there was communication on the issues that were going on, and I can tell you, because I was a member of the Ontario Air Transport Association, I can tell you that the Ontario Air Transport Association lobbied aggressively starting from 2007 forward on multiple levels to draw attention to what was going on. And I think he would be maybe interested to read, and I believe a copy was, I think that Bob Mackey in his presentation previously had provided a copy of the letter that went to the minister. I think it was in May of 2011 or whenever it was. And that was a culmination of multiple efforts and multiple presentations that were made. I think that you would find it an interesting read at this point of the juncture of time as a refresher of some of the information that was out there, because certainly in the light of what's been exposed in this sunlight that is working as a good disinfectant right now, you might find that some of that would be an interesting read again.
And we are out of time for your opening statement, but
Okay.
there may be time at the end, so just save the rest of the comments or work them into your answers if you like.
Okay.
So we'll move to the NDP and begin with Ms. Chelenis.
Can I start? Okay. I was interested in when you started to talk about the overall strategy, and you make this analogy to a stronger rope comes by many different strands being pulled together, and you link that to fail-safe, which is a basic principle in aviation. What exactly did you have in mind specific to Ornge, not theoretically?
Okay.
Specific to Ornge and your business, of course.
Yeah. Okay. Specifically to the air ambulance delivery system in Ontario, rather than just specific to Ornge, but specific to the air ambulance delivery system in Ontario, I strongly believe that there is a need to make sure that you have capable and multiple suppliers. I think that the sole sourcing idea is a very dangerous idea. Anytime that you go with a singular solution, what happens if that solution fails? I mean, tragedies do happen. We know that. Things can happen. Like even if you put your trust all in, look what happened to the airlines that recently had to ground the entire Boeing 787 fleet over a battery. Well, what if the Augusta helicopter, which has had some airworthiness directives come out of it and some problems where they've had to reduce their availability. What if you're relying on that one single type, if you're relying on that one single supplier, that one single type of aircraft, anytime you have one, you have any major problem occur with that one source, you have no options. So I think that there's a real need to be careful about that, and I think that a multiple supplier solution is an appropriate solution.
So I have other questions, but just quickly, do you know within the industry how many use Pilatus versus other types of aircraft to do air transport?
In Ontario?
Yeah.
There's 3 carriers in Ontario that are using the Pilatus, and there are 3 carriers that are for sure that are not using it, that are using other aircraft type.
So your analogy with the grounding of the Boeing would be that if something happened anywhere in the world where the Pilatus need to be grounded, we're doomed?
Well, I'm just using that as a single source example. Let's say that for instance, this is a difficult subject because there was recently a tragedy, and so that's a difficult thing to delve into. But if you have a company, and we know from first-hand experience that tragedies do occur now, so you have something like that happen. What if that operator has to temporarily suspend operations? Then what are you going to do? But if there was questions with regards to the financial strength of companies. And what are you going to do in the system if you have one company that runs into financial difficulties for whatever reason? A lot of companies ran into financial difficulties through this very difficult transition with Ornge because they were under, there wasn't a carrier that wasn't scrambling to restructure their business in one way or the other. Everybody had to do it, and some carriers didn't make it. So whether it's finances, whether it's an accident, whether it's an aircraft, whatever the case may be, if you're relying on a single source, you're in trouble. If you have multiple sources, you've got redundancy to your system. We like redundancies in aviation. We always want redundancy. There's always got to be a fallback. There's always got to be a backup system. Where's your backup system?
Just some brief questions to follow up. Hi there, good afternoon. How long has SkyCare been in business?
SkyCare has been in business for 7 years.
7 years, okay. And when did you start first working with Ornge?
Day one.
Day one, okay.
Yes.
And when you were working with Ornge, was there any distinct moment or discrete time where you noticed that there was something not going well at Ornge? When was that, if you can put it into a year? Like 2000?
I would say 2007.
2007? Yes. And what was your first indication? What was it that set you off that something wasn't going quite right at Ornge? What was that indication?
There was odd relationship issues.
Okay.
And, a simple one, one of the things that we've seen was that the decisions were being made that, you were really scratching your head about. And going,
so what was the decision that was being made?
Well, one that was, that we thought was just a shocking decision was that Ornge made gave a decree that there was to be no advanced care provided by the SOAs for interfacility transport. That created an immediate crisis and they didn't communicate it. They didn't tell the hospitals in advance that they were doing that. They didn't tell the carriers, and at that time we weren't providing any advanced care. But I know other carriers who, the phone stopped ringing. There was no communication that this was coming. And then there was no explanation for it for 2 years. 2 years after the fact, before Ornge finally talked to the carriers about what the reason was, and the reason didn't wash.
Okay. And what about actual patient care? Anything that you noticed with respect to patient care or service provided to Ontarians? When did you notice, or if did you notice there was any sort of problem in that area? 2007.
That was a disaster. The interfacility advance. You talk to the hospitals about the stress that put them under. And the patient wait times bumped up because now the only option there was only 2 options to transport a patient when that decision was made. They either had to wait for an Ornge aircraft, which wasn't a lot of times available because there was now too much traffic for them to handle, or the other was that the hospital had to take a nurse or a physician off the floor and send that nurse or that physician on a primary aircraft to transport that patient, and we've seen some terrible things in that.
So one discrete or distinct thing you noticed was increased patient wait times for interfacility transportation?
Oh, absolutely.
That's what you noticed? Okay. Was there anything else that you noticed distinct service issue or a patient care issue?
Well, certainly our patient care didn't change, and I'm not privy to what was going on within Ornge in terms of its patient care. But like the one that we talked about, that was very substantial.
Okay.
Did you or anyone at your company ever try to reach to the ministry so that they would know what was going on the ground? 2 years where, I live in the north, so I'm fully aware of those long delays. Is a long time. Did any of you reach out? Who did you reach out to, and what kind of answer did you get back?
Well, the communication, I mean, you've heard Rick's comments. And, well, when you have an organization that is 100% in control of your revenue and your business, and with a flick of a switch can put you out, and when that organization is being very aggressive in its actions with you, and when you're making inquiries and you're not getting any help with that, you have an it's kind of, I would give the analogy, it's an out-of-control bully in the schoolyard beating up on people, and the teachers are watching, and then people are saying, well, why didn't you go do something? What did you do as carriers to solve this problem? Well, I just, some of the carriers, they stood in a corner and got a licking. And what were they going to do? Like, what recourse did they have? I don't know what recourse that they had, except to try and take it to court. But then if you're in a legal dispute, I mean, it was like, okay, well, now what are we going to do? So what were the recourses? I don't know what the recourse was, and I don't know what the carriers could have done. The carriers, there was an association that was formed out of that, the Ontario Air Transport Association, and we know that there was even the carriers that were not even involved in air ambulance started lobbying the government because they were very upset by what they seen happening, and they were very concerned at the trend, because they were going, what's the government doing getting into the airline business? Like, they got enough challenges, because the perspective is that the airline, people think that, has anybody looked at the financial returns in the airline industry? The margins are extraordinarily tight. The risk, it's a brutal fiscal environment with high risks associated with it. So it's an extremely challenging environment to manage. And sort of the carrier's perspective was sort of one of shock of, like, really, they're going to get involved in the airline business? Like, how's this going to go?
Well, the result speaks for themselves.
Yes. So there was the recourse is that there was an association formed that was actually led by some non-medevac companies that then made numerous efforts and attempts to lobby the government and bring things to the attention of the government.
When the people would come to your base and do their audits so that you can keep on doing emergency the medical side, did you ever talk to them?
Oh, yes.
And did they offer solutions or offer follow-up, or?
Do you know how trying to think of how to explain that. Sometimes something has to develop. Like it has to go through a cycle before. I believe that the government truly believed what they were being told by Ornge, that, hey, there's all these problems out there, we're going to fix them, and you just watch what a great job we do. And you're going to hear some complainers come to you, but they're just complainers, so don't listen to them. And so there was a credibility issue in that, who are we? Like the Ontario Transport, I mean, just these little business guys over in the corner here, and who's going to listen to them? When you've got experts telling you that, that we're going to do it better. And so I think that, I guess in some fairness to the government, they were sold a bill of goods, that was very well packaged and very well presented. They bought that, and then until some of the mold and rot of it started to come out, and some of the stinky things started to come out of it, it wasn't until then that it finally got exposed.
Do you think that because you're a small business owner in Northern Ontario that you're easier to ignore?
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
further away from the big center,
Yep.
they'll never hear you.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead, Jack.
Yeah, no problem. So in terms of, were you aware of what the ministry was doing in terms of regulating or providing oversight of Ornge? If you were not aware, then you're not aware.
No, I'm not aware.
Okay. In terms of what the ministry was doing with your agency, how regularly or how often was the ministry inspecting your premises or your services?
Well, the Ministry of Health audits us to renew our air ambulance license once every 3 years, I believe it is. The M&R, when we bring an aircraft online, goes through an approval process. And then we don't get audited with them, but they stop by for visits and checkups and things like that.
Given your knowledge, your personal knowledge with your air carrier service, in terms of the inspections, you indicated M&R doesn't do it. But does pop by, and the Ministry of Health does a regular audit. What is your feelings in terms of the ministries, whether they succeeded or didn't succeed, or how they discharge their duties to supervise Ornge? Do you have any comments with respect to that?
Well, I mean, I think that there's two aspects to that. The rear view mirror and looking forward. And in the rear view mirror, I mean, obviously there was failures. Looking forward, we see some sunshine.
That's good.
And I'm looking for a brighter day.
Okay. What's the current relationship with the Ministry of Health?
Good.
And with Ornge, what are you currently contracted to do, if anything?
We're based in Sioux Lookout. We have 3 aircraft, 2 right now, a third one coming online. And we provide primary and advanced care service. And the one aircraft is just a backup aircraft that's coming online.
And how regularly do you provide services for Ornge?
Oh, regularly, almost daily.
Okay. And in terms of the future, what do you see for the future of air ambulance in Ontario?
Well, I hope that you're going to give excellent direction, and that out of this is going to is going to come some very good ideas. And I hope that there is a team effort that's brought about. And if I looked at it ideally, I'd say, well, I sure hope that there's a multi-carrier strategy. I hope that the conflicts of interest that exist are ended. I hope that there's a fairness in the bidding process. I hope there's an independence that's given to the Ornge Dispatch Center, because I believe there are. Yeah, so that's what I hope. I want to make one comment with regards, because we're talking about Ornge so much in a negative tone, and I have to say that Ornge has the frontline staff. I'm very fortunate to have some extraordinary people who are very passionate and very committed and very dedicated to the work that we do. Ornge has the same. They have a lot of very dedicated people. And one of the gems that Ornge has is its dispatch center. And that dispatch center is trying every day to do the right thing. And they ought not to be interfered with because of conflicts of interest. They need to be given the freedom to do their job.
I have one last question before perhaps my colleagues have some more questions. What would you recommend, just kind of off the cuff, in terms of a model where we have public and private kind of working together to deliver air ambulance services? Just in your mind, what would be an effective model to do that? Right now we have Ornge that does have rotary and fixed wing aircraft and does have the medical personnel. How do you think that would work in tandem, in an effective way, in an efficient way, in a way that would help Ontarians with providing public and private kind of mix, I guess? I'm assuming that's kind of what you're advocating, and how do you think that would work?
Well, I think that Rick made a good point, and I think that there's, I made a point right at the beginning to say, hey, something that we all have to back up and take a look at, and that is that Ontario in the past has had a highly reputable and regarded air ambulance delivery system. No system is perfect. You're not going to find the perfect system, but there are cores that you need. And I think that the biggest challenge right now to Ornge is that you've got to find some way, and I don't know what the solution is. I don't have a solution to this.
you have to have some way to end the conflict of interest that exists, because I can tell you that it's only a matter of time. There's lots of egos in the business, right? In politics and in business and even in bureaucracies, there's lots of egos. And you've seen the repercussions of that. And sooner or later, somebody's going to be very ambitious, and they're going to want to do something with, oh, hey, I got control of this. And I think that you have to be very careful to put checks and balances to not ever allow that to happen again in the future.
And you have 2 minutes left.
I was interested in your comments about the dispatch, and in line with what my colleague is saying, do you see a advantage or disadvantage of having the dispatch within a aviation business?
Oh, it can't be within the... It has to be removed from the aviation business. It cannot be part of the aviation business. It has to be independent, because its primary focus has to be, I'm getting that patient looked after.
So, and it is not now, so can you give me a clear example as to why this is bad?
Well, not to say that the dispatch center currently is being run by the aviation. I mean, from what we can see, there has been improvements that have been made, and they are trying to do their job, and they are doing a good job. But you still have that fundamental underlying relationship that's tied together there, where you have them tied very closely to this air operator. I just see that as you need to break that tie, because until you break that tie, you're always going to run that risk, a very high risk of contamination taking place.
Okay. Thank you for coming. It's appreciated.
Thank you very much. We'll move to the government. Ms. Jess.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Behrendt, you came to Ontario to establish SkyCare 7 years ago, meaning 2006. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Who was your first contract with as it relates to transportation of patients?
Well, it was actually it was Ontario Air Ambulance Services.
Which was directly operated by the Ministry of Health and Long-Term Care?
Yeah, I think that we came on just before the formation of Ornge. I mean, I was familiar, and I had worked with a company that was doing work in Ontario before that. So I had worked previously under the MOH with a different company. But then when I started independently my own company, that was just in that transition when it was switching over to what would now be Ornge.
And previously, again, the researcher, thank you very much, has determined that you were in Manitoba with Skyward.
I was in Manitoba, and I was also in the Northwest Territories.
What was your position at Skyward Aviation?
I was the president of the company.
What happened? We have some information that there were some problems with Skyward, that company was dissolved. Can you give us a little bit more information?
Yes. Not sure what you... That's going to take about 3 hours.
Why does Skyward no longer exist?
Skyward went into receivership, and by the time we got it through the receivership, there was just simply the investors that were in the company simply did not have the wherewithal or the interest to keep company going, and so the operation was terminated. There was part of the receivership thing that was a dispute with Transport Canada, and the company didn't survive that, is really what it boils down to.
We were given a quote. It is the Canadian Press Newswire, 31st January 2005. A Manitoba airline that serves the north through passenger and medical flights has had its entire fleet of 25 planes grounded by Transport Canada due to safety concerns. Do you have any comment?
Well, if you'd like to get into the whole story of that...
No, I really don't want the whole story. I just want to know perhaps what those safety concerns were and what steps you took to redress them?
You know, I guess the company never had the opportunity to address those. Because just as for example, Transport did not provide those to the company till substantially after the, like some 30 days or so after it had initiated its action. And the company just never had the opportunity to address them in terms of being able to answer them. And that's all I can say to that. I mean, I can tell you that, you know, if you want to go into a long discussion about it, we can go through it all.
No, that's quite sufficient. Thank you.
I can tell you this, that Skyward had the best safety record of any company its size in Canada. And in hundreds of thousands of hours, it never had a serious injury or fatality.
Thank you. You came to Ontario, and obviously SkyCare is providing exemplary service, and the record is there in terms of the fact that you are providing coverage now and have been fully accredited and certified, etc. However, you came to Ontario in 2006, and you made an assertion in your opening statement in relation to the fact that previously air ambulance in Ontario had been provided through private companies and apparently was exemplary, or you felt it had been of very high quality. Is that correct?
Yes.
The Auditor General, I believe, in some 2007, did actually do a review of air ambulance service in Ontario at that time as provided by private companies. And actually there were a number of questions related to costs, escalating costs, and it was something that was in fact directed to the Ministry of Health and Long-Term Care, that they needed to examine very carefully those escalating costs. Were you aware of that?
I'm aware of some of that. I'm not aware of all of the reports. I know that there's a Donna report, which I haven't read that report. But I was aware of some of the Auditor General information, yes.
In terms of the fiscal challenges in the aviation business, you made a number of comments in that regard to my colleagues. Some would say that because those challenges could result in companies perhaps removing themselves from the marketplace, as Skyward did in Manitoba, that it is necessary, in fact, for such an essential health service to have a public supplier of that service. How would you react to that?
How's it going for you? I mean, with no disrespect, it's if you take a look at...
What do you mean?
Well, you have gone to a public system, like you have Ornge. You have Ornge Air. Okay. And how's that working out? It's a disaster is how it's working out.
You think it's currently a disaster?
You have, just if you take a look at the built-in cost structures that you now have, you've gone, if you take a look, you had a $90 million budget. You have now a $150 million budget, plus you've had hundreds of additional other millions of dollars spent. You have fewer aircraft and fewer bases. Ornge has said that there's more bases, but that's an Enron accounting procedure, because what they're doing is they're talking about their bases, only their bases. They're not talking about all of the bases that were in existence in Ontario, because when you're taking a look, if you're going to say that there's service available, you have to. You can't exclude and say, oh, we're not going to count the SOA carriers and say that they don't have bases. Obviously, they do. Fort Frances is a perfect example. Fort Frances used to have a carrier base there, and then with all of this restructuring, they just weren't able to survive, and so they moved out. They shut their doors and moved out. They actually moved out of the province. And now, I can give examples of, so that base is closed, and that's come at a cost. because now, instead of being able to just take a patient from Fort Frances to Winnipeg and back, they now have to bring an aircraft either from Sioux Lookout or from Thunder Bay. The other thing that happens is when you have, particularly in the fall time, there was an example of this where there was multiple days. There's a mill and a river and there's the runway. And so in the fall time, when it's very common to get very low ceilings and fog there. If you have an aircraft on the ground there and you have a half-mile visibility, you can legally depart from there, but you can't land there. You can't get in because the approach is too high and you're not going to be able to see to land. So, because you lost that service, you've increased costs, and then all of a sudden, in the fall time when it's not uncommon to have poorer weather days, then that service was not available.
Okay, thank you,
not
Mr.
fair
Behrendt. How much of your business is related to your contract with Ornge, and how much have you expanded the way Air Bravo has to other business opportunities?
I think that every carrier in Ontario made alternate plans.
Diversified.
Yes.
Which is a good business practice, I'm sure you would agree.
Yes, it is. And I mean, we initially were focused 100% on the air ambulance, but then when the future became so clouded and there was so much controversy that was going on, at that time we did diversify our business. We had an opportunity to diversify.
So could you give us kind of a percentage? How much is air ambulance related to Ornge, and how much is the rest?
I would say that we're like 60-40, 55-45, somewhere in there, and larger part being the medevac.
If by some change in policy the Ornge directly operated air fleet were to disappear, would you bid on additional air ambulance opportunities in Ontario?
Yes, I would.
So you clearly have a private, personal financial interest in seeing the end of Ornge operating its own fleet.
You know what? I think that as part of the thing here, I had a closing comment that I had prepared, or was going to just comment to. And I'm going to just refer to that. There are many lessons to be learnt from this, what's taking place, because I don't think that anybody can say that what we have is an ideal situation that transpired. You can't say that what's there has been healthy. You can't say that what's been there has been financially prudent. You can't say that it's been good for the patients. You can't say it's been good for the hospitals. You can't say it's been good for the nursing stations in the north. You can't. There's been problems. But there's something that all of us have to pay attention to. Because this isn't about me, and it's not about your party's political ambitions, your party's political ambitions, or your party's political ambitions. It's not what it's about. I said before what the three priorities are. It's about patient care, it's about fiscal responsibility, and it's about a government's responsibility to support an economy. That's what it's about. My personal motivation has to be set aside. Sure, I have ambitions, but I don't have ambitions to take over the world. I want to provide a good service. That's what I want to do. I want to do my part. I live in the north. That's my home. The people that we serve are my neighbors. That's who I want to serve, and I want to do a good job at that. And I think that you have to be wary of anybody that's ambitious and that is trying to score points, because you've got to go back to the core responsibilities that exist, and you've got to address those. That's what's got to happen, and it's got to be fair, it's got to be responsible. And I think that it hasn't been fair or responsible at times. And I mean, you've heard some, I think, atrocious stories of things that have taken place.
Thank you for the lecture, Mr. Behrendt. A yes or no would have sufficed. We are here in the public interest, and I'm sure all of us around this table are very conscious of that. We're well aware of the problems that existed. We want to make sure that they are prevented in the future. And we are most interested in the current status of what's happening at Ornge. And from your comments, I've heard some allusion to improvements.
Yes.
But you've also talked about conflict of interest
Yes.
in the bidding process. Explain to me again, please, where you see the conflict of interest.
How can... I do not understand how Ornge Global Air is nothing more than another commercial air service. That's what it is. It's another commercial. You go and check. It's an incorporated company. You go and check on the Transport Canada website. You go and find out they're another commercial operation. And yet you've handed them literally, at this stage of the game, what we would have to estimate is literally hundreds of millions of dollars worth of contract, and there's been no fiscal accountability. There's no tendering to that. I don't see that that is fair or reasonable to the taxpayer or anybody.
So you don't see that the Auditor General conducting a value for money audit on the Ornge fleet operations would be sufficient to investigate any concerns the taxpayer might have?
Well, I think that there are, I'm going to just say that what are the principles that you're following? What are the business principles that you're following? If you take a look at this article, it's a very interesting read on this the crisis in the healthcare system, and the fact that there is one of the things that they identify is this a basic failure to follow good business principles. And it's interesting if you take a look at the word principle and what principle means. Principle is it's a course of action that it's a rule of behavior. It's a course of action, and the outcome is for sure. And if you don't follow, if we don't follow good basic business principles, what do we think the financial outcome is going to be? The financial outcome is not going to be good, and so that's.
Well, my assertion would be simply that government is not business, and there are different principles at stake. How much time do I have, Mr. Chair?
You have 4.5 minutes.
I think I'll reserve it.
Okay, very good. We'll move on to the opposition. Mr. Klees.
Mr. Behrendt, I'd like to follow up on your comments about the structural flaws in the conflict of interest. I think we have a responsibility, clearly, to get this right. And as Ms. Jazik has indicated, we're more concerned about the present and the future than we are about the past. We've had lots of testimony. We know all of the things that have gone wrong. What we'd like to do now, as we conclude the work of our committee, is to ensure that in our recommendations, we get that right. And it'll be up to the government to decide whether they follow those recommendations or not. And so the reason I was looking forward to hearing from you and your colleagues who are on the private sector side of the delivery equation here is that you've experienced this world pre-Ornge and now currently. I want to pick up on your comment about the structural flaws that are in place. And if you could be very specific, that would be helpful to the committee. What structural flaws do you see, and what would you do or recommend be done to fix those?
Well, I think that there are two that I can picture off the top of my head. One, your eggs are all in one basket. Don't drop it. Again, we talked about a difficult subject earlier, and that is an accident. There recently was an accident. You got all your eggs in that one basket. You have no other backup to it. You have to give special rules, special dispensation to be able to ensure the integrity of the system, and in that you may then have to compromise on certain areas where you may have to keep operating where you maybe shouldn't operate. There's going to be tremendous pressure to do that. Obviously, there was tremendous pressure on Ornge recently, where they had to continue to operate to ensure the integrity of the service. Because then what do? So one, you got your eggs all in one basket, and I think that that's a very risky thing. Secondly,
before you go there, I'd like to just challenge that for the sake of the argument.
Okay.
There will be those who say that we don't have all of our eggs in the same basket because you're here. So on the fixed wing side, we have Ornge in the fixed wing business. They've got their 10 Pilatus aircraft. And we have 5 standing agreement providers.
Yes.
And so there is a semblance of diversity there. We've got some competition built into the system. So from that standpoint, where does that leave your argument about all the eggs being in the same basket?
Well, that's a fair point. That's a good point. Now, I guess one, you don't have any other, you don't have any SOAs though that are in the helicopter operation side of things. So certainly your helicopter operation is very clearly a one basket affair. It is true that the SOAs could step in if there was something happen on the fixed wing side. It's true that is a resource that could be utilized.
Okay, so I accept that argument on the helicopter side because I think, to your point, should Transport Canada have stepped in and ordered all of those helicopters to be grounded because of their findings, or which may still happen, right? I mean, we don't know. Then we have a problem. And so to have more than one supplier or provider makes good sense, and I buy that principle. I'd like to go back, however, to your comment about Ornge Global Air. And the fact that you, as a provider, are actually bidding into an organization that controls you, as we have had some evidence earlier. They set the standards, they set the terms of reference for the request for proposal, but they're also a competitor.
Correct.
Correct?
Yes.
And so would I be correct in assuming that part of that structural flaw that you're concerned with is that conflict, that inherent conflict of interest, where you really don't have a competitive environment. It's an artificial environment. And what if Ornge Global Air was spun out into a separate organization, and if Ornge Global Air had to bid on a level playing field? Do you think they could?
Under the current circumstances, as they're currently operating right now, I don't think they can.
And why would you say that?
I don't want to say. Sorry. I don't want to fix their problems or strengthen their hand, in one regard. But at the same time, I'm a taxpayer, so I ought to, right? I mean, as we watched Ornge, they spent money like drunken sailors. Like, you just watched what they were doing, and you're going like, oh my goodness, like these guys money's growing on a tree somewhere. Is certainly one of the things that we had as an observation. But the other is, it's just, I guess Rick already raised the subject. And one of the concerns that we have, here's my concern. I'm going to say something, then they're going to go fix that problem, and then that's going to have a direct and substantial impact on our business. So I'm going to say it, but it could potentially have a big comeback on the standing offer agreement carriers, because what Ornge has, and they knowingly did this, they're sitting in an overcapacity situation with their aircraft. Plain and simple. You cannot take the capital that they have and just park it on a ramp. I mean, as an operator, if I had the capital that they have sitting on a ramp, I'd be broke in a month. Literally, I would be bankrupt in a month. There is no way that I could afford to do what they're doing. And so, I say that. I mean, they have this tremendous capacity. I mean, they have the capacity to nearly, they're sitting on capacity that could be harnessed to do substantial harm in the marketplace still.
Would you agree, and by the way, thank you for articulating that, because we see that. Mm-hmm. It's impossible. It's absolutely impossible to keep an organization alive without substantial subsidy from tax dollars for the kind of assets that they have, the overhead that they have, the fixed costs that they've committed to, let alone the bond offering that has to be looked after. So we understand that, which is why we're desperate to get to the point where we can actually get some factual information on the table so that we can make the appropriate recommendations to deal with this. Our concern, some of us around this table, is that there's much more intent about protecting the existing model that I think we all agree has been flawed. And, the point's been made. You can fire the people, but if you're still stuck with a flawed structure, we're just going to repeat that. And we'll varnish it as opposed to actually dealing with the issue. I'd like to go on to another point that you made and Mr. Horwath made as well, and that's around the dispatch. I think your term that you used, it should not be interfered with, the dispatch. Now, and we're not talking about the frontline people. You've complimented the work that's being done there, and I think everybody around this table agrees we have excellent frontline people.
Yes.
Our responsibility is that they have the privilege of working within a structure that allows them to be the best that they can be. Could you address this issue of dispatch and what kind of conflict exists there?
Well, I can speak historically. I can project that to the future. And historically, what we have seen happen is that there has been times when the dispatch, where all of a sudden our business dramatically dropped off. And then our crews are hearing the Timmins-based airplane coming into Fort Hope to pick up a patient to go to Thunder Bay, which is a long ways out of the way for them, when our airplane is sitting right there. An airplane ferrying from Thunder Bay going up to Sandy Lake, which they overfly, it's double the miles, or going to Pekanjigam or wherever, to bring a patient to Sioux Lookout. So it's twice as many miles they have to fly. But there's a dispatch protocol then where, we can only, again, I can't bring you concrete proof on that, but you look at it and you go, okay, well, obviously they're dispatching, they've been under instructions to dispatch their own aircraft for this, even though it may mean double the miles that they have to fly. And so you look at it and you go, okay, you're deeply suspicious about what's going on because of the track record. Like, for instance, in the dispatch, when they gave the instruction on the no inter-facility advance, so when a dispatcher was given that instruction, and that was very clearly somebody manipulating dispatch for an end gain for somehow or other for the larger organization. It wasn't in the interest of patient safety or patient efficiency. It was an end gain for something. And so, having seen that take place, then I'm a doubter. And I have no confidence, because my confidence in the integrity of that has been shattered. And that was shattered. And what was the basis for that? Was because of the relationship with the airline. Is some of the basis for that decision. Because, hey, we have to drive business into our own fleet. So then all of a sudden you're making policy decisions to drive the business into your own fleet. And where are you taking it from? You're taking it from somebody else to drive it to your own fleet. and you've made a decision to overbuy. In terms of you got 10 airplanes, you didn't need 10 airplanes. So, looking forward, then I just don't have a strong confidence that that's not going to happen again and again and again whenever things get tight.
Practical argument. Has this ever been raised with Ornge?
It's in the letter that OADA had presented. Absolutely, yes.
That would have been to the previous executive, the previous board?
Actually, that went to, that went to the Minister of Health.
I would think that should be something that the current executive should be confronted with. Mm-hmm. This is something that I would expect the current CEO would want to answer to. Again, the question that one has to ask around this table is how much self-preservation is taking place with these decisions that are being made. Some of that self-preservation may be down 2 or 3 management levels, mm-hmm. As opposed to the board having knowledge of these things. And what would be very helpful is if you could articulate what you just explained to us, send it forward to us by way of a recommendation. Mm-hmm. We would like to move that forward to the CEO at Ornge and ask that there be a review. There must be a way to audit this. If in fact these things have been taking place, mm-hmm. we have the historical data in terms of how the dispatch has been done, where those patient transfers have been made, and I would think that there would be a way to audit that and get a handle on it. Would you agree?
I think so, yes. Yeah, potentially.
Okay. Well, if you could do that,
yep.
we'd appreciate it.
I can do that. Yes.
I'd like to just pass and come back on a closing.
Okay, and I believe NDP used all their time, so we'll go to the government. Ms. Dazzi.
Do you have any evidence? You said in the past Ornge was spending like drunken sailors. Any evidence that the current administration is spending like drunken sailors?
No.
Thank you. In terms of the dispatch, I think you've raised some interesting points. Certainly when we heard from Dr. McCallum, he was very clear that dispatch had a way to go, that they were converting to a new system. I guess in your example that you gave of, this long roundabout trip to sort of drive the business, so to speak, to the Ornge aircraft, how long ago would that be? Like, are you seeing this on an ongoing basis now?
I can't give you an example. No, that would have been, when was that? That would have been, I would say, what is at least 6 months ago, maybe a little longer than that.
Yep.
And in terms of current examples, I don't have anything that I can give you as a current mm-hmm. example, just that we knew of multiple examples and so there was that trend there and so. But, I don't want to, because there's 2 things we're doing here, right? We're looking in a rearview mirror, so we're looking behind us and we're also trying to look forward. And I appreciate that, that the new leadership is making efforts.
So you appreciate that the new leadership is making efforts?
Absolutely,
yeah.
we are. One thing, and this was again another thing that I had, was going to say in my comments, was one of the things that still is a red flag, at least for me. One of the big failings in the past was a failure to consult the key individuals, the real stakeholders. Because if you want to know the health of the air ambulance system, you got to get the hospitals, you got to talk to the sending receiving facilities, you got to talk to the hospital, to the nursing station. You've got to talk to the dispatch center. I mean, I think that they're an overlooked gem. They're a ton of information. They're probably, maybe a bit nervous to say anything, but if somebody there really had the freedom to just speak, they could tell you a lot. because they control so much information and they're giving so much direction, and they see every facet of the operation, from the land ambulance to the interaction with the doctors, all the problems that occur. And so I'm convinced that one of the things that that really needs to happen is that there needs to be an Ontario Air Ambulance Advisory Committee that's made up of real stakeholders that are the frontline people. And if you have those, and it should have two mandates, and the two mandates are, one, a mandate to pursue continuous improvement of the system, and secondly, a guard on strategic direction. And if you have the key stakeholders involved in that, what you're going to see is you're going to see, because I think that one of the things that happened in the past was that Ornge deliberately tried to fail the system for their own gain, is my observation. Fair or not, that's my observation. Because one of the things that I think that would have substantially helped and would have saved all this heartache is if the real stakeholders had got together and been part of forming a strategic direction, and then had a process or had a means to be part of a continuous improvement process. And I truly believe that that's one of the cores that you have got to incorporate somehow or other, is some sort of guard that on the strategic direction, and a process for continuous improvement that brings all the key players to the table. And it has to be the key players, not somebody who wants to interfere, but key players that are really being affected by the service and see the front line of the service.
Have you actually been invited to any such stakeholder meeting like that with the current administration?
Not that I can think of. I know Ron McCurley came around, was doing base tours, and we'd actually asked for a meeting with him, and he came by, and it was very constructive, was very interesting, and I thought a good information exchange. But
so you're sort of, some of the responsibilities that you've alluded to, one would have thought would be the responsibility of the board of directors, but you're implying the need for some expert advisory in terms of the day-to-day operations and ensuring at the end of the day patient safety, patient care is a primary concern. Is that sort of the proposal you're...
Yeah, well, see, one of the observations I have in just simply reading through some of the testimony from some of the previous board was I was going okay, do you know anything about air ambulance? With all due respect to them, because it's a whole different thing when you're in Fort Severn, understanding what's going on and what's going on in that nursing station. How are they what's the land? What's all the logistics of it? What's the service need? And I think there's a real need not to just have people who are isolated from exposure to that. You need to have people who are exposed to it, that are key and that are part of the decision-making process. Because otherwise what you're going to have is you're going to have somebody who has a great idea, but has really not that much practical knowledge about the deliverance of air ambulance services in a remote area. And I think that you have to guard that.
Okay, very well. We'll move on to Mr. Klees. Go ahead. You have 6 minutes, then we'll leave a couple for the NDP to ask another question.
Let's just talk about oversight. You have very extensive contractual obligations. Mm-hmm. You signed that contract with Ornge. Can you tell me what protocol is in place of oversight of your operations by Ornge? How do they hold you accountable for carrying through on those obligations?
Okay. There are a number of tools that they use. On the flight operations side, we are subject to an annual audit, which is contracted out to Argus International. Additionally, they monitor the Transport Canada civil aviation daily occurrence reports, which are published daily, and they're published by aircraft registration. And if their safety officer looks at the corridors every day, and if they see that there was some sort of occurrence, and it can be anything from encountering turbulence, or it doesn't mean that something went wrong. It's just that there was something that was abnormal that occurred. And so if there's a cador that is attached to one of the aircraft that's registered to do business with Ornge, then they'll contact us and ask us for a report. And then they do the audit stuff as well. On the medical side, MOH audits us. Ornge does not audit us on that side. MOH does. They do an inspection when we do the initial setup. But what they do, we submit patient ACRs. I'm not sure what the acronym is, but it's our medics fill out a report, a patient report for every patient that they carry, and then that's forwarded to Ornge, and somebody in their organization audits those for patient care standards, and then if there's any issue, they contact us.
Do you ever get unannounced visits from Ornge for an inspection of your...
No.
Has any representative of Ornge ever been on board your aircraft?
Not that I can recall, other than when somebody's been and I've invited them for a tour in an official capacity. We have Ornge medics that work for us part-time. They've been on our aircraft. But in terms of somebody coming in to do an inspection or doing a ride-along, no.
So there's been no ride-along by Ornge management? Does that surprise you?
I should say, I think actually we did have one ride-along in our history that I can remember.
One in your history?
Yes.
Would you expect that there might be more oversight?
Well, I think that there's avenues for that. We would like for occasionally because it's nice to interact when you're dealing. It's a very important relationship, and so you want to keep that relationship strong, and you want the organization that you're serving to fully understand what the capabilities of your operation and to see what you're all about. So from that perspective, we would prefer to see somebody from Ornge to have a visit every once in a while.
When was the last time that a Ministry of Health representative visited your facilities?
That was, this past winter we had a number of inspectors. I think it was this winter, yeah. We had an audit, MOH audit.
Would that have been scheduled, or would that have been unannounced?
No, that would be scheduled, and then the follow-up visit. I think that would all. I'm trying to remember. I think that the follow-up visit was also announced, like where they were just saying, "Are you going to be around? We're going to be there on whatever date."
Okay. Who is your direct contact at Ornge?
I'm not sure now because Ted Rubicki's gone, so I don't know who the new contact is.
Okay. Do you know why he left?
No idea.
Okay. Thank you very much.
We'll move to the NDP then. Who would like to go? Ms. Chillins?
Thank you. Just quickly, who is your primary contact at the Ministry of Health?
Oh boy. Laurie Breton is our medical operations manager at SkyCare, and I'm not sure the name who our contact is there. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Do you contact them on a regular basis?
There is some interaction with them on a couple of different matters, but it's not it's not weekly or so. It's probably maybe every other month or something like that.
Okay. And how is this relationship?
It's good.
It's good?
Yes.
It was good?
Yeah, they're very good to work with. And
you've talked about creating an Ontario Air Ambulance Advisory Committee. Who would you see on that committee?
Should be a representative from a sending and receiving facility. So it must include a nursing station representation. hospital representation. I would include absolutely it's the Ornge, the OCC, the Central Dispatch, somebody from the Central Dispatch. I would include somebody from medical operations, somebody from flight operations. Ornge has a medical advisory committee, somebody from that. And certainly I would include some of the service providers or representation from the service provider, however that's done, whether it's through an association that somebody's there, but a service provider.
The service provider, you mean
like an air carrier.
Okay, the carrier. And how would you address the fact that some of them are for-profit, therefore their primary motive is to make money?
Oh, I'm glad you asked me that. You know what? Here's, yes. How much time do I have? I'll try to be quick.
Go ahead.
It really bothers me when we get into this not-for-profit and for-profit discussion, because I'm involved in some non-for-profit organizations. And there's something that's common to everyone that I have been personally involved in, and that is that it's very dedicated people working for next to nothing who are volunteering their time and are passionate about what they do, and they're making sacrifices to make a difference. There unfortunately are some corrupted versions of non-for-profit that hide behind the excellent reputation of not-for-profit company or organizations to shelter themselves from fiscal accountability and from competition, because they can't be commercially competitive, so they hide behind that curtain. That's one thing. The other is this notion of that the for-profit. I run a company that's not for-profit. I don't like that. I work for my customers. I run my business by profit, because if I don't develop a profit, the taxpayer's not on the hook. I'm on the hook and I'm broke. So I run my business, and the only way that I can sustain my business is to show a profit. So I am by profit, but I'm for my customers. That's who I'm for. And the fact that there has to be a profit in a business is no different than there has to be or ought to be a surplus or a balanced budget within a not-for-profit organization. And so to say that, to bring that whole for-profit thing into question, it would be like saying that it's only reasonable then that a non-for-profit must always be in a deficit position, and it's not true. So. I understand what you're saying, though, that there is some, that there may be business interests, and people just have to get reminded about the basics and what the priorities are. And if somebody starts to try and influence for commercial gain instead of looking at the health of the system, then they need to be booted out. Because at the end of the day, if it's not right, it's wrong, right? Mm-hmm. That's a simple statement. If it's not, and if it's not the right thing to do, in the end, it's going to fail. So if somebody tries to gain an advantage and take advantage of that, it's not right, and it's going to ultimately lead in failure. So.
No, that's good.
Okay, and we are now out of time. Thank you very much for coming before the committee today. It's very much appreciated.
Thank you.
The committee is adjourned.